Hello, everyone. Good morning to all of you. Can you let me know if I'm audible to you, please?
Good morning, Firoz. Yes,
Hello, good morning, Kasam. Well, thank you so much for once again joining us during a weekend on discussing about this Azure design patterns. And thanks to the founder of this Dear Azure community, Mr. Kasam Shaikh, on hosting this event where we are about to discuss from an architect's viewpoint, right, about the design patterns that we have on Microsoft Azure. So the design patterns is like an ocean, right? We have plenty many things to speak about the Azure design patterns. It can be related to infrastructure. It can be related to the IoT workloads. It can be related to the let's say the database that you're going to host, or let's say even on the basic subscription level that we have. So here in this 1 hour, right, the current 1 hour that we are going to have now is going to be a discussion on speaking about like the architecture and the components that you need to make sure for designing an architecture as such. Okay, so it's going to be like a plenty many discussions that we're going to carry up for the next 1 hour, which is said to be on the architectures of the design patterns that we have. Well, not a big intro, but then a quicker one, right? And Firoz, I'm Abdul Rashid Firoz Khan. I have been a part of this Dear Azure community for a long time, working with Kasam on driving Azure events and to bridge the gap between the Microsoft technologies and the current corporate industries who have been working with the older legacy applications. I'm the founder and CEO of Code Sizzler. We are based out of India and Middle East as well. So we take care of, I mean, we are Microsoft partners on application development, app integrations, and data center maintenance. So I take care of like things to migrate on cloud, right? Migrating the workloads on Azure and setting up the hybrid cloud environment as well. We take care of like the DB migrations all and IoT workloads, setting up IoT workloads too. And we also do consulting. We do trainings based out of like certifications and customized trainings, and we do consulting on supporting our partners, right, to migrate the workloads to cloud. I'm recognized as a Microsoft MVP on Azure along with Kasam Shaikh. So Kasam is one of MVP who is with the AI community, and I'm here with Azure. So I'm also recognized as a MCT, the Microsoft Certified Trainer tag, and being a part of this Azure Cloud Advocate program as well on helping Microsoft with designing the certification track. So I hold like a 10 years of experience as cloud consultant, working with Azure, AWS, and GCP as well. And yeah, that's about me. I have just shared my email ID too. So in case if you have any questions or if you want to reach me out further for any kind of like, challenges, all feel free to ping me. Well, let's proceed. I will here be speaking right from the scratch, let's say from the governance solution. Okay, so one is that we like the governance solution. And I hope we have time. Okay, so based on the discussions that we have, we will also be speaking about the compute infrastructure design patterns. So here in this governance solution, initially, I'm going to start with the conceptual knowledge that you need to understand for a governance. So you will be exploring about the governance, right? You'll be exploring about the management groups, and you will also see like how to manage a subscription, a resource group, setting up tags, Azure policy, role-based access controls, and designing the blueprints. So let's get into it. Okay. See, here the governance is said to be like it's you of course need a design for governance. The term governance describes the general process of establishing the rules and policies, and the governance also ensures that those rules and policies are enforced on your corp industry or in an let's say in an implementation point. So a good governance strategy helps you to maintain the control over the applications and resources that you manage in the cloud. Maintaining the control over your environment will ensure that you stay compliant with, let's say, industry standards, such as like you might be having some security management protocols on information, or let's say the corporate or organizational standards that you maintain, like ensuring that the network data is encrypted. So it's like a most beneficial way where you do like multiple engineering teams working with Azure in a time. And you can also have like multiple subscriptions to manage using the governance. We can like regularly go with requirements that must be enforced to, and we will maintain the standards which we have in the corporate environment as well. So here is the governance resources that we have in Azure. Okay, so the governance resource in Azure is said to be like, let's say, it provides a mechanism and the process, as I mentioned, to maintain the control over your applications and the resource that we have in Azure. So governance involves determining the requirements also. To effectively apply your governance strategies, you must first create a hierarchical structure like how I have shown you here. So this structure lets you to apply the governance strategies exactly where they are needed as such. The government strategies is like we have management groups here. The management groups helps you to manage the access policy and components for multiple subscriptions. And we do have subscriptions. The subscriptions are logical containers that serves as unit of management and scale. The subscriptions are also like it's going to be like a billing boundaries that we maintain. And followed by that, we have resource groups. So resource group will be like, let's say you put up a resource group, which will be like a folder, right? And there you can deploy all your resource that you have. It's like a logical container, basically. It's going to be on your Azure. And it doesn't mean that all your services that we have in Azure needs a resource group, right? Let's say SaaS components like your Azure Active Directory does not need a resource group to be put up. And finally, the resources. The resources are said to be the instances of service that we create. It can be like a VM storage. It can be like a SQL database. And remember, whatever I said now, like a VM storage SQL, you should have known that we need to put this on a resource group. And now we have something called as a management group that you need to understand. The management group is said to be a concept, right? We go with the management groups, which are containers that helps you to manage access, policy, and compliance across multiple subscriptions. So this is simple. Let me say it's you're gonna limit in which regions, right, across several subscriptions and the virtual machines can be created. We also go with providing the user access to multiple subscriptions by creating one role assignment that will be inherited by other subscriptions here. And we just go like monitoring and auditing the across subscriptions, roles, and the policy assignments too. There are a few best practices that we have. I could show you. Give me a minute. Let me open up. I will share this deck to Kazam as well, and maybe you can follow him on Twitter or something where you can get insights. See, this is about the management groups. They give you an adoption framework, and they also say like how we can keep the backup, right, and the managed resource with Azure Management Group to be on secure way. Wait, give me a minute. Yes. So to see the best practice to manage the resource with Azure Management Group, in case if you're doing a migration all, you can make sense with this. Okay, I will share this on the chat as well. This link. Yeah. So followed by this, we do have like next to the management groups, the Azure subscription that you will be managing on. So Azure subscription is said to be another logical container that serves as unit of management and scale and billing boundaries. We have limits and quotas which can be applied, and each organization can use subscriptions to manage the cost and the resource by the group. So here you're going to align your subscription with the business. You can manage the subscription with multi-level of access to be given, say, for example, one for marketing, one for production environment, the other one for any POC kind of steps, right? So you can use subscriptions to organize specialized workloads that need to scale outside the existing subscription limits. It also like goes on, it provides different billing environments such as development billing, test billing, and production billing too. They can achieve compliance by applying policies to a subscription. And it's like we can manage and track the cost for your organizational structure too. So here is how the subscription goes on, right? Uh, we have like a tenant root group that you can find here. So here, let's consider a company. For example, Microsoft is going to have separately for corporate, and they have IT, so that they treat subscription as a democratized unit of management here. And the group subscriptions together will also have the under management group. So HR is a management group, legal is another management group, and in IT you can find we have production is a separate management group. Along with we do have like R&D, the other separate resource management group too. So this is the design pattern which we need to maintain for management groups, which we need to maintain for, I would say, your subscriptions as well. So as of now, you should have a knowledge on how to design the patterns for subscription. This is all like a very scratch level that we have, a very basic level that we have. So designing or maintaining these organizational structures will help you to understand and give a phenomenal experience, right? For your customers, or let's say for your, if you're a consultant, it's going to be for your customers, or let's say for your corporate environment to maintain these subscriptions in the resource. So you may want to bring up that there's some resources such as networking. Those things also we'll be discussing as we walk through. Any questions for me until this? Any interactions, please?
Yeah, one question, Rashid. So,
Yep.
in the portal itself, we can only define up to the subscription level. From the start, we can define the subscription and add the subscription, but not about management group or tenant group, right?
No, we can. Well, let me show you. Give me a minute. If you could go to the subscription here, we do have an option called management groups where we can keep it added up. Sign in, give it groups. So, so here you could find we have subscriptions. Let's say I have a subscription called Azure Pass. And within this subscription, there are simple ways that we put up the resource group all. But this subscription can be connected with a management group. And that's something where you need to go up here. Say, it's not directly on subscriptions. Okay, so we say management groups. Can you find this here? And let's say start using management group. Say it allows you to go with group subscriptions to be added, or you can click on existing group to drill down the details. So we say get started, and I can give the ID. Let me say demo Dear Azure. Okay, and the display name will be Dear Azure. Let's submit. So within this, we can connect to the subscription. I hope you're getting me. So in portal,
Yeah,
your hierarchy starts from the level of management group. All right, there. Any other questions from this? Let's make it interactive, please.
nothing from my side.
Cool. All right. Thank you. Well, so the next is gonna be like we were discussing about subscriptions, and I go here for designing the resource group. So let's say the very basic is that we are gonna plan the resource group here. Give me a minute. Excuse me. So here is the resource group that we have. See, resource group, as I said before, it's going to be like a folder. It's going to be a logical container on which the Azure resources are deployed and managed. So these resources will include like the web apps, right? You can put up database, storage accounts, or let's say simply even the cloud shell at the storage account, which is spin up now. That will even have a resource group to be folded on. So it places the resource of similar usage, type, or location in the logical groups. And thereon, we are going to organize the resource by life cycle so that all the resource can be created or deleted at the same time. We can also go ahead. We can apply role permissions to a group of resource or give a group access to administer a group of resource. Then we then go like using the resource locks to provide to protect individual resource from deletion or the changes that we need to do. So here, maybe I can show you once again in the portal. For example, you can find we have a resource group here, and within the resource group, see, I have something called as a monitored assets, and I've deployed this resource within it. Let's say a web app and an app service plan, the application insight, which is for the same. And here is about marketing content, and we have also the CDN web app. Okay, so the one which I was saying, even the storage which holds the cloud shell. So this is the design pattern, a basic terminology that we have. To work with this resource manager, you need to understand of something called as a AR, right? Azure Resource Manager. And you also need to know about naming the resource group, like what are the terminologies and the standards that you need to maintain for the resource group. Ideally, each and every organization used to maintain a separate strategical line, right? They used to maintain like, let's say if it's code filter, then we used to say CDS, dev, right? And related to, let's say it might be, if it's a Boeing India or something like that, we give a name related to the same. So that's about the resource group, and then designing for the resource stacking. So resource stacking is that a very important part which we need to discuss that's related to building. So you're going to organize the resource and we tag it providing an added information, let's say a metadata content, right? And that's exactly where we plan for the resource stacks. So resource stack consists of a name value pair, like let's say the environment like production or test environment. We normally used to say, right, like a prod VM or let's say a test VM like that. You can assign one or more tags to each Azure resource or let's say resource group or the subscriptions. You can also then go up, we can modify or delete the resource tags. So these actions can be done with the PowerShell, or let's even do it with Azure CLI using ARM templates or we can use the REST API or directly on the Azure portal there. We do have like applying tags to a resource group. In the resource group, it's not gonna like inherit those tags by default thing. And the next design is for Azure Policy and the role-based access control that we have. Azure Policy is said to be a service in Azure that enables you to create, assign, and manage the policies on which we can control and audit your resource thing. So these policies enforce different rules over your resource configurations so that those configurations stay compliant with corporate standards. So here the Azure policy, it's like it defines you with both individual policies and groups of related policies, which is like the initiatives that we have. The Azure policy comes in where, they have like built-in policy and initiative definitions too. The Azure policy also lets you to scope and enforce your policies at different levels in the organizational hierarchy, and they are inherited down the hierarchy as well. So here is all the considerations that you need to know for the Azure policies. So following these things will help you to maintain the Azure policies within our organization in a smoother way. It goes on a high scope, right? And you need to know when the policies are evaluated, right? You also need to design like what you need to do as an action when there's some non-compliant that gets added up. We also need to think about considering when to automatically remediate non-compliant resource and use the Azure policy compliance, I mean the dashboard for audit and review. We then have the RBAC, the role-based access control. So it's going to be a design pattern, one of an important part which we use to maintain on the Azure roles. Okay, so Azure RBAC allows you to grant access to the Azure resource on which you can control it. So suppose you need to, let's say, manage the access to the resource in Azure, okay, for a development purpose or for engineering purpose. In those cases, we used to give contributor level of access. We used to give like a owner level of access, right? So it matters. It matters on what kind of roles and permissions that you're going to define for each and every person. So it's altogether an automated process, and it helps you to observe, audit, and provide reviews on the users, how they can access the resource as such. So we can combine this. We can combine the Azure policy and the RBAC here, right? You first need to have a understanding, which I was briefing now, like what's the difference that you have between policy and the role-based access control. So role-based access control is that, let's say a few questions that we might get. Let's say if your admin has the right to deploy, then it's going to work with role-based access control. It's not with policy. It's about like we provide contributor or owner level of access. And let's say the admin have the right to deploy the resource type. That's again the VM contributor level of access that we have. It's nothing to do with the policy thing. Whereas when you say you need to restrict a data center region all, then it's going to be with policy. It's not role-based access control. Or let's say the resource type getting restricted only for virtual machines or only for SQL database to be deployed. In those cases, it's going to be again with policies and not with the role-based access control. I hope you're getting me, right? Any questions for me until this?
So the role-based access is especially specific to the users who are using this resources, and policy more like generalized thing that what need to be restricted or granted during the
Deploy.
all user.
Yes, it's policy is going to be in general. It works on a subscription level, and you're right. Your user, or let's say on a tenant level, on a user level, we can put up the role-based access control. Let's say if you have a group of people, right, whom you want to put them as a VM contributor or something, then we can use the group that we have, and that's going to be with RBAC, role-based access control. Is that okay?
Yeah.
Right. Well, others, any other questions?
Sorry, hi, Narendra here. Am I audible?
Yeah, you are. Go ahead.
So my question is, so you are talking about the logical resource group, right? As a
Yeah.
logical container. So can we separate it by the environment specific? Suppose I create a resource group based on the dev environment, based on the test environment, and based on the prod environment. So can we segregate it on this way as well?
Exactly.
Because uh,
Yeah, go ahead.
And why I'm saying this, because once I create a resource group, and inside that I have resources like Linux resources. So in that I cannot add Windows resources over there. So it's kind of, I observe that it's kind of specific for the specific OS level, I would say. Suppose let's consider one example. Like I have created one resource group and I created one app service plan with Linux environment. So in this environment, I cannot create the app service with the Windows plan that I observe in the resource level.
Right. Yeah. So your understanding is right, and that's how the normal design pattern is supposed to be. You should maintain a resource group separately for a test environment, for a prod environment, or for a POC kind of stuff, right? And that doesn't mean that for Linux you need to maintain a separate resource group, and for Windows you need to maintain separate resource group. It's not like that.
Mm-hmm.
Uh,
Mm-hmm.
it's related to the deployment scenarios that you have. See, the end of the day,
Right.
the deployment of
Mm-hmm.
Linux virtual machines, the kernel that it gets set up, And for the Windows, right, or let's say for the containers that you're going to deploy, it's all going to be an individual deployments that we have. They have nothing to do with the resource group. Resource group is like
Mm-hmm.
it's like a tag. Yeah, or you can manage the costing, you can manage the RBAC, you can manage like deletion, taking the control over the complete resource. Let's say the NIC, the VNet, the storage account, right? Availability set. So that's exactly where we use the resource group. But you are right. You need to maintain testing as a separate resource group, fraud as a separate. Yeah, that's the
Right.
recommended practice.
So is it like at the resource group level, or is it at the subscription level? What is the I mean the best practice uh, when we set it up, like or when we want to set up a cloud infrastructure?
It's gonna be on a management group level. So we were discussing earlier. Now the
Okay.
management group has to be separately for HR. You should maintain. You need to maintain another one for IT, for example. And thereon we used to say subscription. See, HR will not get a cost cutoff, right? They might be need a subscription for some marketing stuff or something. Whereas when you run some production workloads, and if you're a gold partner of Microsoft or something, or you're an enterprise partner of Microsoft, you might get a cost cutoff during migrations. So for that, we used to come up with a separate subscriptions, and that will be on a management group, which we call it as IT. So it doesn't come under subscription or it doesn't come under resource group level. The top hierarchy is set to be management groups, and thereon we connect the subscriptions all.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what you are saying then in terms of the segregation, okay, when we are setting up the infrastructure, let's say at the network layer, right? Then each resource group will have a different VNet as well, right? In that case, because and then in terms of the how are you going to set the segregation of identities in that case, or is it going to use the same service principles?
If you don't mind, can you make it like even more elaborated, please? What you're trying to relate with the VNet? I'm not getting it. I'm sorry.
No. So when we are saying that have a segregated setup, right, for a production dev or QA environment, correct?
Mm.
And if we are setting up at the resource group level, right? So what I'm asking is that means that in each resource group, we would require to set up a different VNet, right? Or I mean, let's say in prod resource group, I'll set up one VNet that would be only for the resources that is consumed in the production environment, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
And then similar, we will do that in the other one. Okay. Now
Right.
in that case, right? Okay. Okay. But then in terms of the identity, there'll be no segregation of identity, right? The identities will still remain same.
Yes, that's right. The service principle that you create, right? Or any
Mhm.
kind of identity that you speak about, let's say user managed identities or system assigned identities, it's all going to be on a subscription level. It has nothing to do with the resource group that you have.
Okay. Okay. Understood. So is that, I mean, the normal best practice that Microsoft recommend that you should have, like, I'm talking about the enterprise agreements, okay, that you should set it up at the resource group level, such segregation, or the recommendation is set up it at the subscription level?
It's on a management group level, and from there on,
Okay.
it tends to the subscription. So you can see the deck, right? I just want you to take
Yeah.
a screenshot of this.
Okay. HR. Okay. I see.
You have a tenant root group for a core called Tailwinds, right? And from there on, we maintain a separate management group for core when there's another separate management group for IT. And then we go on like for HR legal, like that, a separate subscriptions to be maintained, which is said to be on, yeah, I mean, HRs will have internal, they have NDAs or, whereas you see the other one, the production, right? They maintain separate, again, another management group to come with IT. And thereon, we give the subscription on. So this
Okay.
is what the implementation will be, the design pattern will be.
Okay, understood. So we go one level above the subscription, which is the management group.
Management group. Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Hey, thank you so much.
Yeah.
Hi, Rashid.
Yeah.
One question from my side. I have found that there are few overlaps between RBAC control and Azure AD roles, means RBAC role and Azure AD roles, and it's really important to distinguish these two things in respect of the different scenario or context. So, what is your opinion about that?
Sure AD roles is said to be the one which helps you to manage the Active Directory resource. Let's say you have some AD tenant, right? Or you have the users whom you have added up. So there can be like Azure AD users that you can add, right? Or there might be scenarios on which you will be adding, let's say, groups to be created. Okay, that's all where we work with Azure AD roles. So that's altogether a separate family. Azure AD administrator roles are used to manage the Azure AD resource that we have with the directory environment. Whereas when you say RBAC, the role-based access control, no, it's like we used to manage access to Azure resource, like let's say VMs, storage accounts, containers, SQL database. And to take control with all these things, we go with RBAC, role-based access control. Role-based access control is different from the Azure AD roles. Azure AD roles is like a separate family which speaks about AD administrator, right? AD contributor level of access that you give. So they can create tenant, they can add users, they can delete the users. So that kind of permissions will be there with the AD roles.
Okay, got it.
Okay.
Can we also consider Azure AD permission for access, user access, or end user access in the applications or permission?
Exactly. Azure AD permissions are said to be like built-in, right? It's like a built-in roles that we have. The users in the role will be
Correct.
having the same permissions, like you said, no, you said application administrator role. Let's say you need to give some token acknowledgement access kind of things, or let's say you need to get connected with DevOps as well to give some approval on the flags or anything. So that kind of way it goes with Azure AD permissions.
But when we say RBAC giving a permission on the resources, so how
So,
we identify or segregate the which resources can be created, because the numbers of resources are there. How we can control that part?
see,
Whether
normally when you
we
go with the role-based access control, let's say, for example, I go for this monitored assets, and let me take this web app, right? I go with access control, and now we are at a web app. So when you say add a role assignment, this is called role-based access control. They tell you owner, contributor. So this works with respect to the particular web app that you have. You're getting my point?
okay.
So the role-based access control is specific to the Azure resources, right? And
Exactly.
Azure AD is something that is common to the organization, and that need to, I think, need to be managed policy level at the management level, right? Because, or you
Yes.
can organization level,
Yeah,
right?
so Azure AD roles comes on this part. You can find the roles and administrators, right? Can you find this application administrator, the one someone was asking right now? So it comes on the Azure AD part. It's not on the resource level. See, it's all like you're going to communicate with the applications here, or let's say you're going to communicate with the deployment on DevOps or the directories, right? So that's where you go with AD. Let's make it simple. You need some user to log in, and you want to see like when there's not a defined user, when it's not a defined user or acknowledged user, you need to take an action on those steps. In those cases, we need roles and administrators, which is said to be on Azure AD part. The RBAC can only help you when it's internal within your organization. Let's say we are a cloud engineer team, right? And we are maintaining the infrastructure for example, let's say for Capgemini, right? And we are going to put up the roles where I need myself to be owner, I need Kasam to be a contributor for the same, right? And you people to be developers or something. In those cases, I can go to the web app, and here only we have the roles for that. So it's going to be internal to manage the infrastructure, or let's say the PaaS or any Azure resource that we have. See, website contributor like that. You're getting the point. So these people can play with app service plans. They can play with scaling. They have nothing to do with the development, or they have nothing to do with whom the user can log into the application. Those things cannot be controlled here. So that has to be done with the application administrator role, which we have in the Azure AD part. You're getting it?
And
Yeah.
what about if I want to give a access for the particular region? Is it also control the, or for specific region I want to?
A particular data center region, let's say I'll make the question to be simple. If I'm not wrong, you're asking me like, what in case if I don't want a SQL database to be deployed at Southeast Asia? Am I right?
Correct.
Yep. So that's something again which we work with, something called as a service catalog policy. Let's say here in a resource group, you can scroll down. You can find policies. It's not with rules. You need to do with policies. So here in the assignments, you need to assign a policy and say that you need to put up a JSON file representing this data center region. You don't need to use as such. It's called as a service catalog policy. Give me a minute. I will show you if I have it on my data. Uh, infrastructure service. So like we used to work in the older days. Yeah, can you find the service catalog policy? So this is your scenario that you're saying. Let's say if I'm deploying this, okay, I haven't mentioned the data center region. I'm just saying that the action is set to be like any Microsoft resource compute, which is like VMall, or let's say storage and network, then you can deploy. If it's not any of these things, let's say, for example, I don't have a SQL database mentioned here. I haven't said Microsoft.SQL database or something. So that will be denied. You're getting the point?
Okay.
So this policy has to be created and it has to be added on as an assign policy that you have in the resource group part. Well, okay. Give me some
But
time. Let me complete the either like the left uh, design patterns that I have, and then I'll stick on to your questions. I need another like probably some 10 minutes to discuss about the more design patterns that we have, and followed by that we can stick on to your questions. Okay. Here we go. This is a core important part again, design for the Azure blueprints here. So as Azure has this blueprints, the blueprints lets you to go with a repeatable set of governance tools as I mentioned here. So it's used to scale, right, the governance practice throughout an organization. The blueprint is, oh, I'm sorry for the background noise. Yeah, so the blueprint is said to be like a package related to the implementation of Azure Cloud Service, security, and the design. So design pattern can be reused to maintain consistency in the compliance as well over here. You could say we have like compose we are going to manage and scale, right? So it's like with Azure Blueprints, the relationship between the blueprint definition and the blueprint assignment is preserved here. Azure creates a record that connects a resource with a blueprint that's going to define it. And this connection helps you to track and audit your deployments, and it orchestrates the deployment of various resource templates and the artifacts that we have. So with that, I would like to move with the next stage, which is said to be on a compute solution that you need to know. Okay, so how we can design the patterns for a compute solution. So I'll be speaking about the VM solutions, batch, app service solutions, container streams, Kubernetes all over here. See, this is more about the architecture discussions that we have, and it should be interesting for you people. Consider this architecture, right? Choosing a compute architecture that we have here. So if you take this compute workload, I mean designing a compute solution, it's like the compute refers to the hosting model for the computing resource that your applications is going to run on. There can be like several compute services, let's say like VM batch, which I was saying before. So if you could see this image, this flow chart, which I mentioned, the cloud optimized is said to be like a strategy, right, for migrating to the cloud. And the cloud optimized refactors an application to take advantage of cloud native features and the capabilities. So you see, like we have a lift and shift strategy, which migrates the workloads without redesigning the application or making the changes or the code over here. So you say lift and shift for the cloud optimized, and if it's yes, you move towards the AKS or you move towards the Azure App Service Container for the same. So the output from this flowchart is said to be where you need to think on the starting point. Let's say if you have app service, you have web API or app available, it can be contained or what. So you go with a lift and shift approach to do this. So there's no change on code that we do. Provided when you migrate workloads, which is said to be like traditional applications that you have on, and you're thinking about like moving from the on-premise towards like the cloud environment that we have. In those cases, we need to reconsiderize whether like moving towards a VM that's running a advanced OS level, and let's say you might be having database and application architectures that's running on Windows Server 2008 with SQL database, which is said to be with end of support, and you want to migrate it to the newer version. In those cases, this can help you out. That's all like you just say, I need to go with a newer version, Windows Server 2016 or something like that. And we keep the workloads to be hosted on for the newer one with the SQL database too. Excuse me. All right. So this is what I was speaking about, right? You take the full control, right? And you say that you want to manage with the virtual machine. And if not, you can go with a batch processing to be done with Azure Batch. Or let's say we can even move with PaaS offerings like Azure App Service all over here. We do have the Azure functions, the Azure container instance that we can deploy on. So it depends like what kind of deployment that you want to do. Here is for the VM solutions, right? Azure virtual machines. So when to select the VM, that's going to be like another important part. Where before going up with the deployment, you need to think about. So it's like whether you're building a new or migrating using a lift and shift pattern, the Azure VMs might be a choice for you. So Azure VMs are the basics of the Azure infrastructure service model, and it can be used for the development, testing, deployment of applications in the cloud. It's like the extensions of your data center, and the VM provides a fast, scalable, flexible way to add more compute power to your enterprise. I can go with building new because I'm in a build new because it's going to be a demand for your application, which can fluctuate, and it makes economic sense to run it on a VM in Azure. We can also go with the lift and shift of rehosting the migration strategy that involves moving the data and applications from an on-premise location to Azure-based virtual machines in the cloud environment. We see here, we have like planning the VM deployment. So you start with the network. We can name the VM, then we can dedicate the location for the VM. Like let's say we are designing it, and we determine the size of the VM based on the workloads that you're going to host. Makes sense with the pricing, the storage options that we have, the operating system, and then we can put it up. So just same like this we have for the batch, and we do have it for AKSO on which we can deploy. Okay, so I have like some 15 minutes left off, I guess. So I would like to park here to hear from you if you have any questions, please.